All right. Hello and welcome everybody to this Encompass Skills Kickstart session. We're going to give the other attendees just a minute to arrive, and then we'll have the team here get started. So sit tight. We're going to be getting started in just a moment. For those of you who are just joining us, this is the Skills Kickstart session on ePick Plus, and we're going to be handing it over to the presenters here in just a minute. We will be taking questions throughout the session, so please don't hesitate to use the chat or Q&A feature. We'll be monitoring it throughout, and we can ask them in the moment, live if you want them. All right. I am going to go ahead and call a quorum on our attendees. So we may still have a few more people joining us and trickling in, but I will go ahead and hand it off to our presenters here.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. Welcome everybody again to Introduction to ePick Plus. Thank you for joining us this morning to hear more about our new tool. My name is Mariah Holcomb. I'm a product manager focused on the distribution side of our software with a heavy focus in operations. If you've seen one of our webinars before or been to a BevAge, you've probably heard me talk about warehouse operations. So glad to have you all today and talk more about ePick.
Awesome. And my name is Moaz Mohammed. I'm a customer support analyst here at Encompass. I've been here almost 3 years now and really excited to talk to you all about ePick Plus today. All right, so let's get into today's agenda. First of all, we're going to answer that burning question. What is ePick Plus? And what's the difference between it and our legacy ePick tool? We'll also cover why ePick Plus and some of the motivations and goals that Mariah and the product team considered when coming up with this new functionality. We'll then get into some of the exclusive features to ePick Plus and even get to see them in action with the demo portion. Of course, how to access and begin using ePick Plus is very important, so we'll discuss that as well. And we'll wrap up with some actionable items and some steps to be aware of. Of course, we'll have some time at the end for questions, but like Lori mentioned, please feel free to throw them in the chat throughout any of the duration of this presentation. All right, I'll pass it over to Mariah to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Mo. So what is ePick Plus? This is our latest guided picking experience in the warehouse. So we're talking about that digital pallet and box picking tool paired with some quality assurance processes. Integrating that into a handheld takes away the need for paper and really just offers a more interactive experience for building those deliveries to go out to the market. We're keeping some of our same awesome logic around pallet assignment based on your designated teams and the work that they need to do across the warehouse, along with truck loading priority to ensure that there's no messes at the dock. We're going to keep those same interactions and confirmation methods that we've had within picking for a long time. So we're calling it ePick Plus these days. That does still mean there is interaction by voice commands, but of course we've got the more robust scanning options and the ability for even scanning things like a receiving pallet tag so you can communicate additional information out to your retailers such as dates, batches for potential recalls, and better date rotation in the warehouse as well.
So Mariah, ePick Plus sounds great and all, but don't we already have a tool for this? What's the difference between the tool that already exists and ePick Plus?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mo. We do already have an ePick tool. We're calling that ePick Legacy these days versus ePick Plus, which is our latest iteration of this same tool. So for longtime customers, you may have remembered in the past that we had a tool called VoicePick. ePick Legacy is the exact same tool as that. We renamed it to ePick in 2021 to be a little bit more inclusive to all of the different kinds of methods that you have of interacting with ePick and your products as you're building those orders, noting that we do the voice commands, but we also have that integrated digital scanning. The difference between ePick and ePick Plus is mostly visual, so we were very motivated to provide a more modern look and feel within this tool. But of course, as we move in that direction, making sure that we have some added benefits and just lifting up ePick to that next level as well. We're doing this and having this conversation now because ePick Legacy will reach end of life in September of this year. And that means that'll come with the release of 2509, which is our September version of Encompass.
So is there any specific training that we'll need to use ePick Plus?
No additional training needed. If your teams are already familiar with ePick Legacy, they're going to nail ePick Plus on the first try. So the workflow is relatively the same. There's not a lot of new buttons or things you need to think about within that. So team members that are familiar are going to continue to feel familiar, and any new team members coming in will hopefully get that added benefit of pages that they're interacting with and a tool that is a little bit more easy to understand and not so cluttered with information that might cloud what you need to do next. So to dive into that deeper, I want to talk a little bit more about the motivations and goals of ePick Plus. As I've said a couple of times now, we did really want to make sure that we were modernizing the look and feel of that tool so that it continues to feel intuitive for your team members as we go forward. We wanted to make sure we were focusing on the most important details and really providing a view within that tool that was very clear and easy to use. Within that, that helps us streamline those workflows a little bit and just make sure that your team members are focused on the right things, along with reducing taps or anything else that might cause slowdowns within that palette building workflow. Of course, like I said, with minimal training needed or no training needed, we wanted to maintain that familiarity still, so the overall structure still feels the same. One benefit that we found as we were moving through this modernization of the tool was actually the ability to diversify our devices a little bit and also safeguard our against issues that might need to be fixed on the fly. So what I mean by that, without getting too deep down into development details, is that the structure that we have used to create ePick Plus, this new version of our picking tool, is a little bit more flexible and much less reliant on mobile code specifically. So for those of you that have been with us for a while, using ePick for a while, you might remember that time when Encompass Mobile switched to being in the App Store. If a problem was encountered within ePick specifically on the warehouse side, that kind of fix would require a change to the app code and then pushing that out to the iOS App Store. With that kind of process, that can take communication with Apple. They have to approve it on their side as well. And it can sometimes be even over a week before we can actually get that new app version pushed out to the store. So the less reliant we are on mobile app code specifically, the more flexible we can be and the safer it is if we run into an issue. So the time it takes to release a fix when something's needed really quickly goes back down to potentially overnight. I can't promise that every time, but it does definitely help us within this new structure of ePick Plus specifically. On the diversity side of that, it's the same thing. Because we're not using a lot of iOS app code specifically, that means that we get to use more devices and use lots of different devices to do picking. So we saw that a little bit last year. And of course, I talked about ePick Plus and some of our new devices at BevAge last year as well. But really what that means is being able to step into the Android space and start to identify tools on that side that you can use to pick as well, so that you're not totally reliant on just Apple products to do that picking.
So the fact that ePick Plus is going to be available on Android is really exciting, Mariah. So can we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a bit of a record scratch moment, right? Picking on Android. I think a lot in the audience may have been asking for that for a long time. We've heard that feedback, and we wanted to move in that direction in a smart way, in a way that's still safe and verified to be a success. So yes, picking on Android. What that means right now is that we have a select set of specific devices that do run on the Android platform that we can fully vet, test, and ensure that picking works with those kinds of devices. So right now, pictured on the screen, we can see that as the Zebra WS50. It looks big on the screen right now, but it is a very small device. You know, we're talking probably like 2 by 2 inches on that screen. It's an all-in-one wearable, so you can wear it as a watch or similar to a ring scanner. Really great for that hands-free use that is so important on the picking side of things, since you're grabbing so many cases. This is step one in our ePick Android process. Now, we do want to be careful about the way that we go about this. On the iOS side of things, there is a pretty select and clear set of devices that we're working with, which is why we stayed on that side for so long. It was easy to ensure that everything was going to work because there was only, 5 or 6 devices that we would need to test. On the Android side, there's a whole world of devices out there, and it includes things from a Google Pixel to a Kindle. So we wanted to make sure that we're not picking on something like a Kindle, for example, right? And we wanted to be really specific about the kinds of devices that we're using. So Zebra WS50 for now. We have some additional devices coming out very soon uh, that will be running on Android too. And we'll continue to review those options and vet specific devices on Android in the future as well. So on this side, I talked about the iOS App Store already. We're going to continue to maintain that. That is not going away. But on the Android side, we do get that improved response time on fixes and a little bit more flexibility there. So great options on that side. And shameless plug here for BevAge, we've got a hands-on hardware lab where you will actually be able to hold all of these different devices in your hands and try them out in real time to see what that picking or even other warehouse activities are like. So I would definitely say if you're not signed up for BevAge already, or you are and didn't know about the lab, definitely come check us out, because that's going to be a great opportunity to see ePick Plus and those Android devices in general. So this is a slide some of you may have seen before, but just looking back at some of our other motivations for ePick Plus specifically, and the paths that we now have laid out because we can start picking on Android, wanted to talk through some of our history and the options you have now. So a couple years ago, most of us were probably on iPod Touches out in the warehouse and using some kind of Zebra ring scanner like an RS5100. Of course, after that, since then, we have learned that Apple was putting an end of life on iPod Touches, and that meant that the most common device in the warehouse was going away. So we're in a phase now where we are definitely hoping that everybody has gotten past that bump and has shifted to an iPhone of some kind. We also know that SEs are on their way out, but there's some other low-level iPhones that can be good for that option. So like I said before, we're going to continue to maintain that iOS pathway. That's never going to go away. You can keep your same scanning devices, upgrade to a more recent iOS device, and continue with that path if your team's very comfortable with that. And we'll see that a lot still today with ePick Plus. It's it runs great on that device, right? The other method now coming through as well is that Android option. So right now we've got that WS50. It is an all-in-one device, which also means you don't have to keep those separate ring scanners. And it really pares down the amount of hardware that your picking team members have to keep track of as they're doing their job. Both of those pathways can exist in harmony together in one warehouse. So if you want to try some WS50 devices, you want to keep some of your team members on iOS devices as well, that's totally fine. Of course, from a maintenance perspective, it might be better or easier to go to one or the other, but both of those will be supported long term. So no worries on whichever you feel is right for you and your team. All right, so we've seen some of these screenshots before, but just to dive into ePick Plus a little bit deeper. So we've determined we're gonna use ePick Plus now, whether we're keeping our iOS devices or trying to shift to Android. The view is a little bit different on those small WS50 screens, but it is using ePick Plus. So a lot of the flow will feel the same. We've got a refreshed look and feel, should feel a little bit more modern for everybody. The way you're interacting with the page will be a little bit easier. Main thing here is that we've got better access to high use filters. So thinking through legacy ePick, that first step in the process is typically selecting the date that you're working with or the date you're picking orders for. And then past that, once you're in that main page of ePick, you've got the option to assign pallets. However, there's some other things you might want to filter for, such as the pick team that you're supposed to be picking for at that time, or even the pallet type that you need to be focused on. So instead of hopping into settings for those things, we've gone ahead and moved those really high use filters to that main page to reduce clicks. And we can see that up at the top of the screen there. Along with that, we have just generally reduced the clutter of information that we were seeing on the screen and have shifted to high focus on exactly the points of data that matter. So when we're looking at the main page, that's things like the pallet ID, the route, and the customer. And when we're in a picking page, the main things we care about there are what bin should I be taking this inventory from and what product is it? What's the kind of confirmation method I should be doing to ensure that that pick is correct? So very clear directions, and for team members that are newer, this should feel pretty self-explanatory as they go through the process. And generally just more visibility on progress as well on those pages. We can see up at the top of that right-hand screenshot there our progress bar to show you where you're at in the progress or process of picking. And then up at the very top next to picking that pallet ID, we've got our total units for the pallet. So you can kind of see as you do each pick, how much of the pallet that is as well.
So can we get into some of these special exclusive features that are available in ePick Plus?
Yes, absolutely. So as we noted up top with this presentation, there are some ePick Plus exclusive features. You may have noticed throughout the last year or so that we have been fairly focused on ePick Plus. So ePick Legacy has been receiving fixes to make sure it's still operating as it should, but any new improvements that we have added have all gone into ePick Plus. So this is really our focus as we continue forward this year. And we move towards end of life for ePick Legacy. So a couple of the things we can see here right now, we're looking at the settings menu for ePick. And we've added some new options that your picking team members can turn on or off based on what's right for the flow of the pallets that they're picking. So the first one is multi-scan prompting. Last year, we adjusted our picking logic a little bit so that if you had the same exact product on multiple pallets that you were picking at the same time, you would only have to scan that product one single time. That's great for a streamlined flow, but for some warehouses and some picking teams, you may want to verify it's the correct product every single time. So in that case, what we've done is just add this setting into ePick Plus to toggle which method is preferred there. So if you want to require that multi-scan for the same product every time, you can just turn that on. The workflow will still be relatively streamlined from there, but you will do that scan every time. Another big one here, as we talk about the stability and ease of use of this tool, is layer prioritization. So this is an important one for team members that may be newer to the pallet building process in general. We know that experienced picking team members will typically know what makes a pallet stable as they go throughout the warehouse and put those cases on the pallet. For someone who's newer, they may need a little bit of help prioritizing those layers so that they build a really stable base. And this is helpful for everybody, regardless of the amount of experience you have, because toggling this option on will mean that the system will make the decision for you to put those layer quantities down at the bottom of the pallet. And this is for hand picking. So we're not talking about someone who's on, the fancy claw machine forklift and can grab those layers with a machine. We're talking about someone who's going to hand stack those layers onto a pallet. So that layer prioritization just helps you get that really stable base on there to avoid breakage and lost sales down the line.
Another huge benefit to ePick Plus that we really want to drive home is just how much easier it is to navigate overall. So now you can get back to the main page or the home screen with 2 simple taps. When you start picking, you can tap the 3-dot menu in the top right corner, and you'll see an option to tap Main Page. And this will immediately return you to that main warehouse menu. And what this button does is help simplify that warehouse workflow by reducing the amount of time and effort needed to navigate between the picking process and some of the other warehouse functions. So no more need to hit that back arrow endlessly.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good call out. And we'll see that one in person with the demo as well. So we can kind of demonstrate some of the different options as we go through a palette there. So a few more of the more detailed or more in-depth exclusive features of ePick Plus we can see here on the screen now. So replenish requests and bin inventory correction are 2 things that really go hand in hand. And we can see those in our first screenshot here on the left side. So these are controlled by 2 system settings that we introduced last year, where you can determine if someone is going to be cutting inventory from a pallet or they even just choose to skip that pick at the time. We can prompt them to take a couple of additional actions based on what we think might be happening there. So let's put ourselves in the POV of a picking team member for a moment. And we're building our pallet, maybe we're about halfway through, and then we arrive at the ACR pick bin, like we can see on the screen, and we find that that bin is actually empty. At that case, I have 2 options. I can either cut that pick and it's immediately a lost sale, or I can skip over it for the time being. Maybe there's some replenishment happening in the background and they just haven't gotten to this bin yet. So I can hopefully come back to that later to maybe a more filled bin and grab that inventory. In both of those instances, it may be that the system had a certain inventory number that turns out to be incorrect, or we're just a little bit behind on replenishment. With either of those situations, it's better to communicate to the system at that time that something is off so that there's more time to correct that. And hopefully you can avoid additional lost sales down the road for maybe other team members that are going to pick that same product coming up soon. So for replenishment requests, we can see that as the request a replenishment line on that screenshot there. You're literally creating a directed replenish task based on the inventory that we need to be picking from that bin for that product. So that'll immediately go to the directed replenishment tool within Encompass Mobile without having to do any sort of manual communication with your team members. They'll see that task up at the top of their screen, and then they can complete that replenishment before it's too late. With the other one there, reset bin inventory to 0, that's more about the system thought there was product there and actually it's not there, right? We would always hope that we've got our counting practices down and that everything's accurate, but things happen. So in this case, you can go ahead and tell the system, actually, this bin is empty, there's nothing there. And that's just a good reset. So we're not continuing to communicate that something's wrong. Your picking team members don't need to leave the picking tool to communicate that kind of thing. And then if there is also replenishment happening in the background, we can trigger it that way as well, because now the system understands that the bin is empty. Our final one here is, I know, a long requested feature, so that is the ability to change the pick bin. For some warehouses, you may have that trust in your team members that, if you've got multiple different bins with the same product available, they can pivot from one to the other when one becomes empty or doesn't have enough product for their particular pick. So in this case, it's that same situation, let's say. I'm that picker who's halfway through their pallet and I arrive at a bin that's empty. But in this case, maybe it's a bin that has that same product right next to it. So we've got that multiple pick option. For something like that, we can set this up by pick methods to allow for that pick bin change during the picking process. Once that's turned on, then all of the picking team member has to do is tap on the current bin for the product, and then they'll see this screen on the right side where they can actually choose based on current available inventory and the expiration date, where they can actually pull that bin inventory from instead. So this helps them make smart decisions about where inventory is that it's available and continue to respect those date rotations in the warehouse by being able to see that date on the screen. Of course, if you don't want your team members doing this, this is an opt-in tool, so just leave it off in your pick methods and then it'll be that same picking flow where they cannot change the bin. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a moment while I switch to our device simulator, and then we will get into that demo. All right, looks like everybody should see the screen here. So what we've got in our warehouse menu is our picking section. You'll notice that ePick Legacy and ePick Plus are both displayed here. This will be an upcoming view for you, and we'll get more into that after our demo. But I'm going to hop into ePick Plus. And then we can see that right off the bat, we're already in the main page, but we have some selections to make. So in ePick Legacy, that first screen you see is that date selection. It's going to feel similar here, where you can select that date that you're going to be picking for. But once I make that selection, we can also see
Say begin to continue.
that date is just right up at the top of the screen, along with our other filters here. So before we actually get into picking some palettes, I'm going to hop into the settings section and we can take a look at some of those options.
Yeah, so like we said, the Cognex cameras leverages a device's built-in cameras for barcode scanning. So what it does is effectively transform your smartphone into a barcode scanner. And we also have our options to go into settings here. And this goes into a lot of those kind of nitty-gritty settings on the warehouse side. Something I wanted to call out is upload logs there at the top. So when interacting with customer support and troubleshooting ePick Plus issues, you may hear us ask for logs. And what logs are is the warehouse activity kind of focused into a singular record, and it really helps us troubleshoot issues and kind of determine how the user is interacting with the mobile application.
Yeah, that's a super important one. And as we scroll through here, this is going to be really similar to the screenshot we saw in our slide deck, right? So a lot of these settings are going to feel very familiar. For those of you that are very familiar with ePick Legacy, instead of having those two separate settings pages, we've combined it into one. So it's a little bit easier to find what you're looking for as well there. Anything related to device settings are going to be found down at the bottom. And the last thing I'll point out about our settings here is some additional streamlining that we've done. So just for example, with our printer settings here, for For those of you familiar with ePick Legacy, you'll remember that there was an option to choose whether or not you have a default printer and then also what the printer is. So we've combined those as well. If you don't want to have a default, you can just set that to none and continue to streamline those choices and options throughout the flow. So we'll back out of settings here.
To continue.
And then I'm going to hit start picking. So in ePick Legacy, this is the same as the begin button, but you can also potentially hear those vocal prompts from our simulator here saying begin will still always be that voice command option. So that's not going away either. And a lot of those instructions, if you're going to do verbal commands, will be found down here at the bottom of the screen. So say begin to get a palette by date. For the purposes of this demo, my microphone is going to stay muted, but you would want to unmute that if you're going to do voice commands. So let's hop in. So the first thing we can see here, this is somewhat familiar for ePick Legacy as well, though it is a more recent addition, is that right at the beginning of your pick, before you've actually started any products, the first instruction that we give to a team member is what palette types you should be grabbing. And that is the same for whether you have one single palette that you're picking on a palette jack, or maybe you're doing 3 at a time. We're always going to show this page first to make sure that it's really clear what kinds of platforms you should be getting, or those real palettes to start stacking your products on top of. So we'll go ahead and hit continue. Noted, we've got some Miller palettes here that we're working with today.
Capital L, one case, 2 boxes, palette, capital A.
And then from there, we've got our vocal commands from ePick. So you might notice, if you're pretty familiar with the verbal commands there, that this is somewhat streamlined. That's because we have a different setting turned on to do streamlined commands, which essentially just shortens what ePick says to you down to the essential information. Another way that we can keep that workflow pretty clean.
And also, now that we've started picking, we can see that 3-dot menu in the top right corner. And when we click that button, we'll see the option has populated to go back to our main page. And what that does is just give us the option to seamlessly interact with our different picking process without getting lost in the weeds.
Absolutely, yeah. So in times past, if you needed to pause halfway through that palette, right, it was just back until you could leave. So we've shortened that down to 1 tap just to continue to make that option a little bit easier to get to. So now that we're in here, we're familiar with this. We've seen these screenshots in the presentation, but we can talk through some of these a little bit more. Up at the top, we've got our total units that we're working with, along with the total products that we should be picking. So one thing you'll notice is that the 0 out of 7, that is for this palette specifically, 332671. This progress down here is for all of the products that you're expected to be picking right now. So in this case, on the screen as well, we can see my palette index down here at the bottom. I've got a palette A. I also have a palette B. So we're currently in this demo picking 2 palettes at a time. That's my, this 0 out of 7 does not match the total product count. It's because that progress bar is for both palettes that we're working on currently. If I want to get a little bit more detail about what's going on with those products and what I'm working with, I can tap that View All button. And that's going to take me to the product list here. So it's going to feel pretty familiar for those of you that know ePick Legacy. Main difference is that the current pick you're working with is going to be highlighted in that Encompass teal color. And as we go through this list and complete picks, we'll see check marks for each thing that's completed.
Capital L, one case, 2 boxes, palette, capital A.
So with those commands again, now we can see that information on the screen very much matching to what she's saying to you out loud. So we're expecting to go to bin L1, pick up that Canada Dry Ginger Ale, which is 1 case. Within this particular product, 1 case actually indicates 2 12-pack boxes, and there's no kind of tray keeping those together. So what we know from that is that there's 2 individual pick units making up this one case. That's why we can see that 2 boxes in parentheses. The system's always going to clarify to you what you should really be looking for based on what that case quantity is. So in this case, it'll say 2 boxes. If you're picking the whole layer, we would see 1 layer in parentheses instead. Clear call out to any specific batch codes or code dates that you should be looking for based on that expected rotation of inventory, and then our pick quantity down at the bottom. Now, if I want to cut that product, maybe I've arrived at an empty bin, what I can do instead is just tap into that box and then change my quantity. Using that verbal command, I could also say quantity 0, and that'll update. So once I have my products adjusted to how I'd like to work with that, I can go ahead and hit next. One thing I will note is just for the purposes of this demo, we are using a device simulator here, which means I can't connect to a scanner. But in this case, instead of a next button, what we would see first is actually that prompt to do a scan or say your check digit or scan a pallet tag, whatever that confirmation method might be, will come here first before I can actually change that quantity. We've just streamlined it a little bit for this demo so that I don't get stuck not being able to scan something that is not really with me. So I've hit next, and we can see that because I have chosen to cut that quantity, the system is prompting me for that next decision. So do I want to request a replenishment, or do I know that we're completely out of this product and that there's not a replenishment we can do, right? So in this case, I'll leave that checked. That's going to make a replenishment task for that team to go after and hopefully refill that bin for me.
Capital G, 1 case, 2 boxes, pallet, capital A.
So once we've gone through that, as soon as I hit next, I cut my product, I've told the system I want to go ahead and do a replenishment. As soon as we get past that decision, we're on to the next product, and that's what we can see here on the screen. I'll hop back into the products list for just a second so we can see how that change looks. So in this case now, I chose to do a cut. So instead of a check mark next to that pick, we have an X there just to indicate that there was a change. I was not able to do that pick. So reduced to 0, X, no inventory there.
Capital G, 1 case, 2 boxes, pallet, capital A.
Should have made her talk a little bit faster for our demo today. But one last thing I'll demonstrate here is that change bin option. So we can see go to bin here and G1. So if I wanted to go ahead and change that, I can just tap this little arrow here that indicates I do have other bins to select from. And that'll take me into my bin list here with available inventory and dates so that you can choose a different location there to work with. In this case, in this demo, we actually have that additional bin selection turned off. So that's why it does not prompt me to select that up at the top. But at this point, you would just go ahead and tap into that, and it would change that bin for us on this page. So with that, I'll go ahead and just quickly tap through these to get through the rest of our palettes. And we'll look at one last thing in this demo here before moving on.
Capital G, 26, 1 case, pallet, capital A.
So once we've gone through all of our picks there for the palette, it'll prompt you to print based on those load group settings that you have. So do you want to print a pallet tag when that pallet is complete? Most of the time, the answer is going to be yes. So it'll prompt that for you here, and you can make that selection. Like I said, if you have none selected as your default printer, you're going to make that selection every time. But as soon as you tell the system in your settings that you do have a default printer you work with, you won't see this prompt.
Say begin to continue.
So now what we've got here is 2 pallets that have been confirmed. That pallet list will maintain throughout the day, so you can always go back and check in on those, see which route you were working with or which customer you were working with, as well as in tapping on that product pallet list, you can see products and even print another pallet tag as needed. And what I'll tease a little bit as well, we can't see it in this demo, but in the very next version, this product list is going to be a lot more robust. You'll be able to see a lot of palette information about that as well. So what dock does it belong to? What bay does it go in? Those kinds of things that you might want to look up in palette inquiry are coming soon to an ePick Plus near you. So that once again, that workflow is streamlined for your picking team members and they don't have to do a lot of additional taps to find out what's important about that palette.
Say begin to continue.
So with that, I'll wrap up the demo and we can hear from Mo about how to get access to this.
Awesome. So thank you, Mariah. Let's shift our focus to a key aspect of adopting the improved picking experience, and that's making the switch. So one of our goals is making that transition to ePick Plus as seamless as possible. As of the current release, ePick Plus can be configured in the EM Warehouse mobile application, which many of you who use our legacy ePick tool are already familiar with. But starting with version 2506, you'll find ePick Plus integrated directly within the default warehouse menu in Encompass Mobile. So this will put that enhanced functionality right where you need it, within your standard warehouse workflows. To help with this transition, both the existing ePick Legacy tool and the new ePick Plus tool are going to be listed together under the picking section in the warehouse menu, like we can see on our screenshot here. The side-by-side availability just allows us to explore and become more comfortable with ePick Plus while still having that access to the familiar legacy version. If your organization uses custom mobile applications for warehouse operations, a mobile link will need to be established with ePick Plus, regardless of what version you are on. So we'll get into this a little bit more on the next slide. All right, so let's move on to how you can specifically access ePick Plus with custom mobile application. So as we mentioned, with ECP version 2506 and beyond, ePick Plus is a fully fleshed out and ready to utilize feature. You can absolutely jump in and leverage its full capabilities. But with that being said, we do understand that some of you may prefer a more gradual adoption. So this slide will outline a few optional steps that you can take if you're looking to dip your toe in the water before a full rollout. So step one would be to identify some users to switch. If you'd like to start with a smaller group to get that initial feedback, identify some specific users for this early access. Think of this as your focus group. Step two would be to switch those users to a separate role. So to further isolate that initial testing, we can optionally switch the focus group users to a separate role within Encompass Mobile. Now, step three is going to be creating a new mobile application to control access. So for even greater control, you can have that option to create an entirely new custom mobile application specifically for the purposes of using ePick Plus. Many of you, like we had mentioned, are already working with the customized version of Encompass Mobile for Warehouse. And what this does is provide a dedicated environment for your initial testing and make sure that there's no disruption to your broader user base. We do have some help resources that give some step-by-step instructions on how to create mobile links. But of course, you can always reach out to us on support, and we'd be happy to walk you through those steps as well. Now, regardless of whether you choose to implement the first three optional steps, step four is crucial, and that's creating a mobile link for ePick Plus on your desired mobile application. And ultimately, this is the step that makes ePick Plus accessible on the handhelds. So finally, we'll want to set the mobile application on our desired roles. And this step will determine which roles in Encompass Mobile will have that final access to ePick Plus. So the key takeaway here that I wanted to highlight is that ePick Plus is ready for full use. And we really encourage you to explore that new look and feel and get the jump on those questions that you may have.
Awesome. Couldn't have said it better myself. If you're wondering what's next, the answer here is don't wait. Like Mo said, ePick Plus is available right now. It is totally ready for you to make the switch and take advantage of those new and improved tools and interfaces and all those great new features. So definitely take advantage of the next 4 months before we reach end of life for ePick Legacy, which is 2509. The sooner you switch to ePick Plus, the more time you're going to have to feel comfortable with that, ask us any questions, and even provide additional feedback about the tool as well. And of course, I can't leave this webinar here today without saying once again, we've got that awesome hands-on hardware lab coming up at BevAge at the beginning of May. So take advantage of that opportunity to test drive our new devices, see ePick Plus in action, and really explore all of the different and latest options you have for hardware in your warehouse. Couple of help resources that we'll call out really quick just to make sure that you all have access to the knowledge needed to keep going after this webinar. Mo did a great job of talking through how to get ePick Plus added to any custom mobile apps, but we have a Customizing a Compass mobile help resource as well to utilize and lean on if you need some help with that, along with some additional help resources regarding some of those new features in ePick Plus specifically and working with the WS50. But more than that, I would encourage you all to check out Bev, ask her a question, and lean on that helpful AI information that is utilizing these SAM help resources in a way that is a little bit easier to digest. So thank you, everybody, and we'll open it up for questions. Looks like we have some in the chat already.
We do have some questions that have come through. I want to start with one that asks, as a manager, how can I track the progress of my pickers on my end?
Yeah, great question. So within ePick Plus, because a lot of that and ePick Legacy in general, if you're using those digital tools, we're getting really live, real-time information about the progress that they're making. So similar to the way they can see it on their screen, you can see that same information within Encompass. We have a pick productivity dashboard that is meant to be displayed on TV screens out in the warehouse or be monitored on a desktop by a manager. So that's where I would start. I would say check out the pick productivity dashboard that is built off of Fusion reports. So if you have additional tailoring you'd like to do from there, our team can always help you figure out how to make those adjustments and get the right report for your team.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mariah. All right. The next question is, what is the exact date of Legacy ePick end? When is the sun setting on ePick Legacy?
Yeah, good question. So when we say 2509, that is our September release, but it is specific to when your site upgrades. So what you could imagine there is that if your particular Encompass site upgrades on the third weekend to get that new version, for you it would be, somewhere around September 20th or something like that. It's going to be with that upgrade to 2509.
Awesome.
Good dashboard to check is manage upgrade to make sure you know exactly when your next upgrade is scheduled.
Good call out for that dashboard. Thanks, Mo. All right, next up, for layer picking, if we described multiple products with the same size, could those be categorized together, such as Bush 2412 or Bud 2412?
Yeah, what that sounds like to me is maybe some opportunities for more pick rule management too. So if the products are similar packages, I would expect that you probably have those slotted around the same area in your warehouse already. So the bin sequencing is still going to help you keep those together, especially if they're both layers. If there is, a little bit more spread between those and you just want to really make sure that those get grouped together on your palette, what we can do would be work with a product pick type in your pick rules and just really make sure that those are set to, group together first and then stack on that palette.
All right, thanks. We do have one more question here. Darren, can you clarify your question? Maybe retype it. Was it on a slide? the question is, I missed what the capital A means, but I'm not sure if that was on the slide or part of the demo. Was that?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, let's back it up here for a moment. Let's see, we heard it in the demo. Where was it? Not pictured in our screenshots here, but when we're looking at picking a particular palette and you have an A, that means that we're working with some palette indexing. So palette index just means like A, B, C. If you're picking 3 palettes at a time, one of those palettes is going to be A, one of the palettes is going to be B, one of the palettes is going to be C, right? So when ePick Plus tells you and shows you that this pick is for A, that means that that case you're grabbing needs to go on that first palette of your lineup there.
Ah, great. And I looked at that and I was like, oh man, this is the difference between a real pro at ePick and a newbie like me, I guess.
Living in a warehouse, so yep.
All right. Now, I don't see any other questions that we have not yet addressed in either the chat or Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my little wrap-up spiel. But if you are typing out a question, we're going to go the long route. So you have some time to get it in there. All right. I want to start by thanking Moaz and Mariah for their time today. This was really helpful. I know that we are looking to, retire and sunset that ePick tool. So looking at this and being ready for that future when it comes to our door in 2509, I think is really important. Thank you to all of our attendees here. You guys are ahead of the curve. Love to see it. Love to encourage it. We would love to see you at BevAge as well, so they can get some of these devices into your hands, and look down the road a little bit more into the future of what it holds for the devices and technology that you could be putting in your warehouse. At the end of this session, we are going to be posting a survey. Take a second and fill it out. I'd love to get your feedback about the kind of things that you'd like to see in the future, the kind of sessions you'd like to participate in, both in Skills Kickstart and in BevAge. I want you to know that I am actively planning right now for the fall round of Skills Kickstart. So if there is something that you'd like to see in longer form content like this, that survey is a great place to put it. We'll also be posting the recording of this session on the recording archive, so you'll be able to reference it at any time if you need a refresher when you are ready to make that move. We did have a quick question that came through the chat, so let's jump over to that. All right. Would a replenish request be an alert that is visible to a certain role in the warehouse, such as a receiver would get an alert to fill a bin without backing out of the current job?
Yeah, great question. So we do right now, the way you would see that is within the main menu of the warehouse side of Encompass Mobile. So specifically for directed replenishment, when a new task becomes available, you'll see that as, a clear number within on the line of directed replenishment. So it'll tell you like 1 right next to that tool. That is a little bit more of a passive notification. Someone needs to be looking at the menu screen to know something like that. But on top of that, what we can do is add an additional alert if that's something that would be really motivating to your team. You can go in and create an alert for that so that whenever a replenishment task does get created, someone gets pinged, and you can set that to whatever ping is most preferred, whether that's text message, an email, an e-chat might be great for this instance because they can get that push notification and see that on their warehouse iPad or whatever that may be, just for that additional communication.
All right. Thanks so much. Now, if you are typing something, go ahead and get it in there as soon as you can. I don't see any other questions in this chat. So I hope we all have a great rest of the day. Have an enjoyable week and weekend, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks here in Denver, I hope.
Thank you all.
Everybody.
Thanks all.
Bye.